Hi there guys, it's Aaron here from Console Deals, back again with another on-camera video. And before we get deep into things, I want to just say that I hope you had a very nice bank holiday weekend for those in the UK. And for those outside of the UK, well, I hope you're enjoying just as much sun as that we seem to be getting right now. But into the thick of things, I'm here today to talk to you and give you my general overview impressions for a small game that some people may have heard of called Outriders. Outriders, obviously the latest and greatest third-person loot shooter from the folks over at People Can Fly, which people probably remember for their work on Bulletstorm, which is a really fun, really chaotic first-person shooter, but also for their work on Gears of War Judgment, which is a sort of much maligned, but still pretty decent, pretty good, and pretty fun entry into the Gears of War franchise. Now, Outriders released last Friday on Xbox Game Pass Day 1, but also on PlayStation consoles like PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, obviously. And I've been playing it for then. My original plan was to get a proper video and written review up on the channel and site, but as many of you probably know, due to server issues, it's simply not been possible. So I think that I've put into Outriders maybe about 8 to 10 hours of gameplay. My character is at level 15 at the moment, and we've just sort of gone into we've left the Eagles Peak snowy area is what I'll say. So anyone who's played the game will know whereabouts where I'm at. And I think it's safe to say that I've played the game long enough now. I don't think the sort of gameplay cycle, the loop of your enjoyment is going to change much after this. But from what I understand, from what I can see online, there's still lots of game left to go. So what do I think about Outriders? Well, I think it's a very competent, very solid third-person cover shooter. At first I was initially quite surprised and taken aback at just how heavily it does lean into the cover-based side of things, particularly because we seem to have gone past that sort of style of game with the new generation of consoles, and even slightly before then. But that being said, it's really nice to see this return where you're kind of ducking behind cover, using your powers, firing, trying to gain advantage on someone. And I just want to say that Outriders, in a game like this where third-person shooting kind of is the main crux, it's so important to have decent enemy AI. And for the most part, enemies, unless it's relevant to their class and they're primarily melee based, they just don't seem to be rushing in without a second's thought and trying to ram you, because then it would just be too easy, like lining up pigs to the slaughter. You'd pop, 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 just shoot them way too easily. But in addition to obviously tight cover-based shooting, and I would say that the shooting in Outriders for the most part does feel particularly satisfying, even if it's not quite as tight or, great feeling as something like Destiny, Bungie, the guys over there, they've cracked the code on how to make a shooter feel good. I would say that Outriders, even considering that it's third person, you're getting a good level of feedback whenever you're shooting, just legions and legions of bad guys. But on the other side of things, obviously Outriders isn't just a shooter. You've obviously got 4 different classes to pick from: the Techromancer, Pyromancer, Devastator, and I believe the Trickster. I went for the Pyromancer, so it's a suite of abilities all based around fire, because that seemed fun. When the demo came out, I think it was around a month ago, I tried playing the Trickster, and that's a very close range class, and when I was playing with a friend, I found that class particularly difficult to get my head around, because you've just got to sneak up right behind enemies, and when you've got a sniper that's sort of like 10 meters away, if not more, it became really annoying to try and get behind them. So if you're watching this and you chose the Trickster class, if you're enjoying it, do let me know in the comments below, because I know obviously the more levels you gain, the different elemental powers you gain. But in addition to that, so the Pyromancer I'm having a lot of fun with. Your initial starter skill is to sort of you unleash this wave of fire, which is really good at keeping enemies at bay. But I find that my favorite power to use is actually the Inferno bullets, I believe is called, where you can temporarily make every bullet fired, enable a fire elemental stat boost, and then you can kind of just set your enemies alight, and it's a fun old time. Now obviously the gameplay doesn't change much from there. You're constantly swapping out different armor, different boots, different weapons. It's a very loot driven game, and these you're finding primarily either through boxes through the world, completing side objectives, or just generally advancing your level. And what I will say is that from a story standpoint, I'm quite surprised at Outriders. I think it's delivering a pretty decent story. I was not expecting the time jump at the beginning of the game. For those that don't know, the game takes place in the far future, where what's left of humanity has been forced to vacate Earth. They've arrived on this new planet planet called Enoch, but you are one of the Outriders. And at the very beginning of the game, a devastating attack happens which forces you into cryosleep, in which you're eventually awoken, 30 or so years later, and the lovely, luscious paradise you found to begin with is no longer around, and you're having to contend with these ongoing civil wars between, the human survivors and inhabitants, but also the natural agricultural wildlife that are native to Enoch. And while the story doesn't do a particularly good job at sort of like presenting its ideas forward, I would say that in the moment you're constantly traveling to different locations. The levels are pretty visually arresting and distinctive, even if from a design standpoint they're not the most exciting, because you're constantly having to dip behind cover. So 9 times out of 10 what you're doing with you and obviously a squad of 2 others is just dipping below cover, arriving at a new open space, dipping below cover, shooting and firing again, rinse and repeat. But having said that, I don't mind how repetitive the game has been, because I'm constantly gaining new loot, constantly gaining new equipment, and I'm unlocking even more badass and fun to use pyromancer powers. So the game itself is really fun. Those are my general impressions. I think People Can Fly are really onto a winner here. Many people might consider this to be sort of a Destiny meets Gears of War, which isn't necessarily wrong, but one thing I will say is that whereas Destiny is very much an MMO based sort of shared world shooter, people might be sort of surprised at how pared back Outriders is in comparison to that. It feels very much more aligned with something like Borderlands 3, where it just so happens to be a co-op experience if you want. You're never bumping into other players, you're never seeing others in the world, it's just you and a group of friends firing aliens in the face and having fun doing it. But obviously the big element in the room is that over the launch weekend there were some major server issues, particularly on the PC side from what I understand, and there's a theory going around that because the Xbox Game Pass version went day and date free to all these subscribers, People Can Fly and indeed the publisher Square Enix wasn't quite expecting how popular the game would become. So hence the reason why, guys, I'm not able to bring you a full written review. I haven't been able to finish the game yet, so I hope you'll enjoy just my initial impressions, but I do plan on playing it. Maybe there's room for a review in the future, but I wanted to give you some initial impressions. One thing I don't understand about this whole server issue is that because it is very much sort of like a online co-op shooter as opposed to something like a shared world style game, why have servers been built so intrinsically into the body of the game in the back end? Why am I dependent on a shooter if I just want to play the game solo? Like, I don't think it doesn't pave a great way forward for big AAA blockbuster games going forward if they're going to design their game in the back end in this way, when something like this could just as easily work as an offline game, in my opinion. But who knows, maybe later on down the line, give it a couple of years, this allows People Can Fly to do things like seasonal events and kind of like temporary sort of setups that you can experience in the world while they last and make it feel a bit more alive and thriving. But for now, at least, as far as I can tell, there is a bit of an end game with this sort of section called Expeditions, but then again, it's just you're recycling the same side quests in order to get better loot. But I will stick with Outriders, definitely. It's been one of the biggest surprises of 2021, I think, for a lot of people, and it's been no doubt helped in that popularity by the going free for Xbox Game Pass subscribers, which is an insane get. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, hit the bell, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. We at Console Deals are relatively small, but we're constantly growing, and I'm gonna keep the video content going. So anyway, guys, thank you very much again. Enjoy your day, and until next time, happy gaming.